Welcome to Amazing Americans, your source for authentic stories of inspiration, where we highlight motivating and amazing achievements by your fellow Americans. Now, here's your host of Amazing Americans, Kate Delaney.
I'm really pleased to welcome to the show Linsey Willis. You know, what's so interesting about Linsey is the torch that she has had to bear, but also that she's taken up in a positive sense in memory of her sister who struggled with severe mental illness, being diagnosed as bipolar. And to be able to do what she was doing as a management consultant, married, having a life, you know, eventually going from childhood to that, she took up long distance running, you know, because that I'm sure is a way to get out of your head, as we all know, when you're struggling with somebody you love and trying to think of solutions. It can be so difficult in your own hectic life. And she's written a really powerful book called Be There, My Lived Experience with My Sister's Bipolar Disorder. Linsey, thanks for sharing your story with us.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Let's talk first about the beginnings and your sister in your life as a kid, and what happened, and when did you realize, you know, the whole family was coping with what was going on?
Well, I noticed her behavior started when we were like less than teenagers, young kids, and growing into our teen years, and she just was never very nice to me. And I was her little sister, and she was pretty dominant, and just some of the behaviors were just not very nice. And I've heard that from a lot of, you know, friends with their sibling rivalry and all that stuff, but it just got worse and manifested itself as we moved, and she just got worse in terms of her treatment of me, and you know, like stealing boyfriends of mine, and, you know, just criticizing me all the time, and then when she was diagnosed, you know, using drugs, marijuana, hash, and things like that with people. We didn't realize that probably that part of that was back in those days, you know, in the 70s, but she was probably doing it, like I said in my book, to sedate her mania. But then, you know, when she was diagnosed, then we learned more about the illness over the years. I realized, oh my God, it probably started when she was a, you know, young teenager.
Yeah, and nobody had any idea, or you just knew, wow, like you're describing to us, this is just kind of what happens in families. You're the younger sister.
Well, yeah, and, you know, my parents were extremely well-read, but back then in the 70s, these illnesses were in the closet, and you didn't hear too much about them. And, you know, for example, my father was very lucky to have this really great health insurance plan. When he worked with Goodyear, he had a really great job, and that covered her for three months in the hospital. In those days, back then, it was unheard of to have that coverage. So that's when they learned about this illness. This is what's wrong with her. And then, of course, they started reading more
about what that meant.
Yeah, and what the diagnosis was, and you know, we read books. I shared information with them from National Alliance with Mentally Ill, but back then it was, you know, it's hard to grasp, put your hands around when this brilliant woman, you know, Ivy League educated, got into all these schools, straight A's, you know, and she's engaging all this bizarre behavior and then using drugs, and then she overdosed with drugs. Then it's like, oh, is this why? Because she's got a mental illness.
Yeah. When she overdosed, what was that like for the family? Because like you said, Ivy League, super smart, super attractive, you know, just outgoing when her personality was what it was before she hit those lulls.
Well, I wasn't there when it happened. I was up in school, you know, college, and my parents, she overdosed, and I don't know how they took her to Butler Hospital at Brown University, but I guess that was back at we lived in Massachusetts, but we lived like right over the border to Providence, Rhode Island, because the states, you know, are small. And she overdosed on Quaaludes, and I guess they rushed her to the hospital, and she got in that hospital, and maybe it was recommended. And then my parents said the whole time she was there, she was like really kind of drugged up and, you know, kind of out of it, but not. She was doing a lot of artwork, and, you know, just just sedated kind of, because they were giving her different medications. And the miracle drugs at that time were lithium and a mild tranquilizer, because lithium was the miracle drug that I read about. Dr. Phoebe, there was a book that was written about 30, 40 years ago about that. That was the miracle drug that helped people. And it basically is a salt. So I wasn't there, but they visited her almost every day at the hospital, the psych hospital.
Yeah. And so for you, you're at school, and what are you doing at school when you're hearing, some of these stories?
I'm just like shocked, and I'm like, felt terrible, and I went about my business. But back then you just figure, oh, she's going to be taken care of. She'll be okay now, and then she'll be all right and go back to college, and everything is going to be hunky-dory. And I always thought, well, she'll always probably be not nice to me, but maybe she'll change.
Yeah. One of the things you talk about in your book is events that could have triggered the illness.
Yeah. I thought maybe all the moves we had, there was this tragic deaths in her life with close friends that, several of her very close friends, one of her best friends died of a drug overdose. She learned about it years later when she moved to Hollywood, Florida. And then, her boyfriend at the time, he died of a drug overdose. And we had moved away, and one of her best friends took away her boyfriend. And when we moved away, of course, we moved away because my father got transferred, but he also wanted to get her away from this guy. He's in the book. And then, my cousin Kim, her boyfriend got killed in a dune buggy crash in the desert, and the thing flipped over. They were all in the dune buggy, and he died immediately. And that devastated my sister. And then my cousin Kim ran away to Mexico. She was fluent in Spanish, and she ended up at the airport. She joined the Moonies. So Betsy lost Kim. She lost her boyfriend. She lost her best friend. She had a lot of, and then a couple friends, friends of ours in high school in Pittsburgh got killed in a car crash. Two of them were good friends of hers. And then another person that was a high school friend of mine, he got killed in a car accident. So we knew a lot of people who died, when we were young.
Yeah, so dealing with a lot of tragedy, but you had to deal with some of that tragedy, obviously, too. Was that tough for you? Is that when you started to learn some coping skills?
Well, I guess so, but also, I guess I've got more resilience, and I've got more, strength, and I was just like the underdog, and I just kind of, went along. I just went along to go along, and I just, I guess I just got used to being, verbally abused by my sister, not treated nicely, and just kind of that had an adverse effect on my self-esteem. But I've worked on it my whole life. This is certainly building my self-esteem, being interviewed by you.
Wow. Yeah.
I gotta laugh.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's it's interesting because you think of that whole lifetime of that and dealing with it. And of course, loving your sister. How many people listening to this show, you love your siblings no matter what's going on, and you're trying to help. And did you feel like, as you got older, what can I do to help? How can I jump in?
And she wasn't as horrible as she used to be, because we all grew up, we had our lives, we got our education, we had jobs, but the last 15 years of her life were probably the nicest years that she was to me in her life, because I guess I studied sociopathic personality years ago, and one of the things I learned about the criminal personality was they're less likely to commit crimes when they're older, because the body ages and you burn out and what have you. So I kept thinking, well, maybe her mental illness is going to burn out a little bit. It's not going to be as exacerbated as it was when she was younger. So maybe that's why she's nicer to me, because as the people age, they slow down and what have you. So maybe that's why she was nicer. But she had a secure place to live, and I was her lifeline, because my parents passed away, and I was totally responsible. I was her payee for Social Security. I took care of all her extra expenses, and I promised never to abandon her. And I wasn't going to abandon her. You don't do that to people.
What did you do to help yourself?
We had been running since the early 80s. So I'd been running all along, and I continued running until maybe 7 years ago, when you get older, and you just had a little arthritis in my hip. And now that I don't run anymore, I don't have it anymore, but I do other exercise, plenty of other cardio stuff.
Right. Yeah, so is that when you started long distance? You said
Yeah.
you started doing that, but that was also a good escape because
Oh God, yes.
you were competitive.
Yeah, well, not really. I was always the back of the pack because I didn't care about, you just want to finish in class and style. You want to get over that last 6 miles of the marathon or the last mile and a half of a 10K or half marathon. You just want to, like my husband used to say, you got to finish in class and style. Just don't throw up before you get to the finish line.
Did you meet your husband through running? How'd you meet your husband?
Yeah. I met him we met at finishing a 10K run, a 6.2 mile run at John Prince Park in Lake Worth, Florida. And there were a bunch of road runners there, vocal road runners, and I met him there. And I thought he looked like a wet rat. And and then I ran into him at a triathlon. We had just gotten out of the ocean swim. We parked our bikes next to each other. And so we just hung out together, and did training.
And it turns out that he ended up doing how many like 50?
50. And you know what? Years later, we found out years later that his brother, who we got a psych evaluation report from his brother, who passed away before he did, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and he was an alcoholic. And all those years, the 2 marriages he had, a divorce, he was suffering from bipolar disorder and never got help for it. And so his drug was alcohol. And that's known for the bipolars. They would drown them. That's how they deal with the alcohol or drugs, to deal with it. And so then we realized, no wonder he was so horrible up and down for so many years, but no, he never got help.
Right. So you're surrounded by that. And it's interesting that your husband was so physically active and 50 is a lot. And how many of those you did? Like 4 of the ultra?
4 marathons. No, I did 4 marathons. I didn't do the ultra, but he did many ultra marathons. He did a couple half Ironman too. And, so that's what keeps your sanity in life, with exercise and fitness, because you can deal with just about any stressor because, you go out and sweat it out. You sweat out the endorphins kick in and you just feel elated and you feel better. Yeah.
You talk about coping strategies. And so obviously that's one, being physically active and whatnot. And again, there's definitely people listening to this that are struggling with family members, or they may be struggling themselves and keeping it to themselves as best they can, because that's the other thing. How do you survive in a world where you don't have a younger sister who can help you and her husband, because you became that caretaker? What are some other things that you think would help other people that you talk about?
Well, aside what's in my book, I talked about the 4 C's, and I just talked about how I coped on my own without even reading any, other literature. You come up with your own ways of dealing with it, and through just trial and error. Some people can go shopping, and some people can overeat. Others can engage in, bad relationships with people because they're punishing themselves. There's so many destructive things you can do that you think is okay, but it's really your way of coping. Like I could have been with a verbally abusive, mean man. I had a couple verbally abusive boyfriends, but you don't hang out with that. But then you say, just because my sister was verbally abusive doesn't mean you should put up with it from a boyfriend.
Right. It's interesting in talking about relationships too, because you were married and you met your husband doing something that you liked, but your sister, she had lots of relationships, like she went through that period, and that's also part of what you had to deal with.
Oh, God. Part of the illness is promiscuity. That's one of the characteristics: pathological lying, promiscuity, grandiosity. And so she was very promiscuous. And years later, she told me she never even liked sex, but she just did it, and then she didn't like it anymore. But she was always having sex with different guys and always had tons of boys. She always had a boyfriend. She could get anybody she wanted. She always had a guy. She never, her whole life, never was without a boyfriend. Now, I was with my husband 39 years, so I was lucky too. But when I was younger, I certainly wasn't sleeping around with all these guys and going through all these marriages and what have you.
Yeah. How much did that scare you especially because you had that stability, how much, as somebody who was caretaking, watching out for her, how much did that scare you with the situation with marriages and all of that?
Well, one little small paragraph in my book, I explain why I never had children. As I was working, going up the hierarchy in different jobs, and my last job working for someone was an HR director. Then I built my business and got a job at the university. So I was doing a lot in my career. I never had children. They'd be, "Oh, how come you never had children?" And I wouldn't tell everybody. "Oh, because my sister's a sick bipolar and I'm afraid I'll inherit that." And they'll say, "What the hell's bipolar, manic depressive?" So I just kept it to myself, and I finally let it out. Well, that's why I didn't have children, because I'm not going to bring into this world somebody who has the possibility of having that type of a life, even though there's all these new medications. It's not fair. It was a very unselfish thing that I did to not have children.
Yeah. Did you think along the way, as your sister, as you were talking about treatments would work for a while, and did you have that hope where it was kind of like that push-pull? And you talk about it in your book where you get hopeful because there's these great moments. And like you said, the last 15 years, your relationship with her, of course, she was older, but did you ever think, "Oh my gosh, maybe we've unlocked the key. This is amazing"?
No, because Betsy, after she overdosed on lithium, it was never the same. And then she bounced around from hospital to hospital where she, different places that she lived. And, so every time you go to a different hospital, you're going to get, you're not necessarily going to tell the doctors the drugs that you were taking. She would remember most of the time, but then they don't have access to the medical records of the other places you were at. I can almost guarantee you that before the online stuff. And then they do the treatment that they think is right, and then they basically lie. My sister became a prescription drug abuser for many years. She was a medication seeking because she loved those painkillers.
Yeah.
So that was part of the problem. She was an addictive personality.
Yeah. Because you were married for 39 years, what did your husband, he just was there for support, what did he think as you were going through all this? Because I'm sure he was obviously there and aware of so many of the things that were happening.
He had a difficult time. He was more patient because the first time she met him, she was extremely nasty to him. And she was in a manic or whatever combination, manic depressive. She was extremely nasty to him. And then he saw what I went through and how the holidays, we'd spend the holidays with them because his family were up in the Georgia. My parents were in Florida, so we'd always go up there. And she always managed to ruin or throw a wrench in every Thanksgiving or Christmas holiday. So he didn't like that because, oh no, Betsy's arriving. And he went with me to visit her in New York a lot. And the last trip was this. He said, "I'm not doing this anymore."
What was one of the tougher things you dealt with?
I left a lot of gory details out because it was just too much, but we rented a car. And I think that was the last time we rented a car was at the Newark airport. That's the horrible thing to rent a car, boy. And she got hooked on laxatives because the drugs, when you take all these different drugs, the drugs cause you to get constipated. Well, she got hooked on laxatives for a while, and she had a huge accident in the rental car.
Wow.
And that was it. And that was, the last trip was just horrendous for us, and other things that took place. And then she had another accident at the place we moved her to, and she was running up and down the place. And he just said, "I can't do this anymore." And I said, "Honey, I don't blame you. We'll save money by you not coming."
Right, because I don't blame you.
So, so you have to laugh. One of the coping mechanisms is laughing instead of crying or slitting your wrists.
Right.
You've got to cry. You got to laugh sometimes because that breaks the tension.
Right. And it's interesting. You and I talked about this. I mean, this is why the name of your book, you're talking about, this is why speaking to you, you're talking about your lived experience. It's very rare that anyone in the background that's important, that's vital, nobody wants to talk about that. So they don't want to the people that are the brothers or sisters, a lot of times they don't want to talk about that. But I think if more people shared the stories, that might help.
Well, because then they know they're not alone, and
yes.
There is hope. There is hope that you could find a place to live. There is a hope that a new drug might help you. There is hope that there are people like out in TikTok now that are talking about it, and out in the Facebook groups where I've looked, checked them out, and I've seen a couple million people in a Facebook groups for bipolar. They know, and there's more written about it. And people talk about it. The caregivers talk about it, like a sibling caregiver that friends of mine that read the book, they said, we had no idea you ever dealt with this. You never talked to us about it, because I don't want to drag you down. I don't want to talk negative stuff to my friends.
Right.
So, you don't want to be negative. You just want to cope with it with your closest confidants, like my husband and the other couple of friends that I could talk to and not feel. But I wouldn't want to share all the gory details with anybody. That's why I put it in a book, because then everybody knows you're not alone. Hey, you're not alone.
Right. Here's the things that happen. Was it also too very, I would imagine for you, because when you'd see her, but then you leave, and you're only, when you're in contact, you don't know what happens when you leave. You have to somehow mentally pull yourself into your life, right?
Right. And at least I knew when I left, when she was living in Spring Valley, and that's covered a lot in the book, at Evergreen Court, that she was safe and she had a roof over her head. And then if she was in a psych ward at a hospital, she was safe, and she was in a lockdown facility, and she wasn't roaming the streets, and at least you know that the person is safe.
Yeah. A lot of times it's funny, it's like you were talking about kids and not wanting to pass that on and wondering about that, but you didn't have the same condition, obviously, as Betsy had. Did you trace that in family history? Could that go back anywhere in your history?
Well, we traced it back to my great-grandmother. That's why I covered it in the book, because my dad told me about it. He never talked about her. But then finally, years later, they started telling us about my great-grandmother. Like, she would go wandering and they couldn't find her, And there was stories I read about bipolars, famous bipolars, like the woman that used to play Lois Lane in Superman. She died recently. She would go wandering around. And that's one of the things. They would just go off for days and not even remember anything. I couldn't believe that Betsy never remembered any of the horrible things that she did, because I read that. I always thought she was lying, but when you go through a manic phase or something, you don't remember a lot of it.
Yeah.
I guess the mind blocks out the horror. Just like in a car accident, you don't remember a lot of what happened.
Right. Of all the things, and you do talk about it a lot, what was the scariest thing to you that happened?
Oh my God.
There's so many, right? I know, because you talk about them. Yeah.
Well, one of the scariest things was when my sister was living with a boyfriend up in St. Augustine, Florida, who she had met in a rehab or psych facility, and he wanted to become a doctor, and he was very smart, but his illness prevented him from going to medical school. And Betsy was a psychosocial worker, and they ended up living together, and she got manic, and he had to call the police on her. And our parents met one another, thought, God, this would be great. The two of them can have a life together. You got supporting family members. Well, she started to beat him up and attack him. And so we called the police, and the police came in, and she went after the policeman. So they locked her up for 6 months in jail. And I was really mad at my dad that he wouldn't bail her out for $5,000. But back then, this is back in the late 80s, early 90s, we didn't know that we still had hope. But I don't even know she got her medication when she was locked up in a jail cell. I didn't have any contact with her. St. Augustine was like 3.5 hours north of me. I never visited her. And it was really scary and terrible. It's scary that she was going to get kicked out of where she was living a couple times because she was smoking. She got smoking a couple times, and I had to beg them to let her stay there. Scary when that fire took place. That whole fire thing was horrible. And scary when I picked her up. The worst thing, picked her up at that, and she was only like 90 pounds. I was scared, but I didn't know she was dying. It was just.
Right. You had no idea.
A lot of terrible things, scary things.
Yeah. Tell us about the fire, because I think that's frightening. And you talk about that in your book.
Well, I get a call from a woman that I knew pretty well, that there was a fire at Evergreen Court. She called me the next morning and said, the place burned down, but your sister's okay. Goodbye. Hung up. she couldn't talk. She was, I guess, Nancy was being dumped on. She has to call all the family members. And I'm like, are you kidding? Where's my sister? I didn't know where she was. She's okay. They moved into a facility. I didn't even know where she was moved to. I found out somehow, what's going to happen to her. And then when she was in that psych ward, I thought she was going to die. It was just very scary. I was like, now what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And I didn't want her to die, but then, you don't want the person to die because you'll be, you're left. I'm alone now. I don't have any family members left. I'm a very small family, a cousin, and you don't have her anymore. And then I miss her, but I don't miss the misery and the heartache.
Yeah.
Those things were very, very scary. I was so scared. I was scared when I was driving home in that horrible thunderstorm. I thought I'd go off the road. That was scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And just coping with it, so many things. And one of the things that's interesting and I think wonderful is the narration of the letters that you do.
Yeah.
And
the letters kept me tied to her. The letters she wrote me most of them were so horrible, but then they were also showed her love for me.
Right, because that's her writing you, and so it's not physically talking and going through the ups and downs of all that. And then she had tender moments, and so you could see the person behind all of it.
Yeah, that's what my dad always said. He said he always believed there was always a good, smart person behind all that horrible illness.
Yeah. So when your sister dies, and now suddenly it's a weird thing because as you mentioned, the burden is gone in one sense, but then the person you also love is gone. And now you're really pushing, and through your book and through other means, to try to raise the level of awareness for, as you mentioned, TikTok. Now you're seeing more people. There are more people talking about it more than ever in my lifetime. People have talked about any form of mental illness.
I just wanted to get the book finished. I was working on it before she passed, not knowing how close it would be. I wanted to get the book done. I put it down for 20 years. I've got to get this book finished. I want to get it out there.
Thanks for listening to this show, and our guest this week has been Dr. Linsey Willis. Her book, Be There, My Lived Experience with My Sister's Bipolar Disorder. And it really is very insightful. It's heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching. It's a memoir where you share accounts of living with and of course taking care of your sister Betsy, who had bipolar disorder. And how do we understand more about this mental disorder? And what was it like for you? How did Betsy get some occasional, at least hopefully, peace of mind? And I would think it'd be so healing for people who are in this situation. I bet even in our listening audience, there are many people who are dealing with siblings or children who suffer from some sort of mental disorder, and it takes its toll. And of course, you're concerned about your loved one. So there's all of that goes into this too, as well. And you talked about the fact that, this was 20 years basically in the making. And then it comes down to, okay, you're pulling it all together and you've got scientific references and information about the genetic link to mental illness. You have all these photographs and historical documents. You have her letters written by Betsy. And there's so many things you'll learn. People will learn about the characteristics of a person with bipolar disorder, but it wasn't easy to have this book actually be birthed, so to speak, right?
You would believe how difficult that is. I sent it to 12 publishers, not the big 5, and only 3 accepted it. And 6 never got back with me.
Wow.
That's how tough it is. So, but I said, I want to get it out there. I want to share my story. I want to help other people. I want Betsy's life to mean something. I made a promise to her. I said, you will never be forgotten, Betsy. I'm not going to let you be forgotten on her deathbed. And I guess one of the other beautiful things was she waited for me. I prayed to God that she'd wait for me to arrive. And that was very touching.
Right. And she waited.
Yeah, I would have been,
tough.
Nobody should die alone. Nobody should die alone.
Yeah, I agree. So with all the knowledge, all the things that you learned and And again, just an incredible resource for, I think, so many people, because you lay it out. And like I said, and the reason too for speaking with you is the fact that it took its toll on you, and it's what you've overcome, and what an inspiration you are to write that kind of a book and to try to be out there raising the awareness that there's so many people that are suffering through this. What can we do as a society to help people, good people, people we like, people we know, people we went to school with, people that were funny, people we worked with and then they disappeared and you never knew what the story was. I think that's the other side of this. So often people don't really know what the story was.
And they end up at a place like Evergreen Court. And that's another reason I wanted to get that book out there, because I knew a lot of those people and they used to be somebody until they had a diagnosis. And then the place burns to the ground, and that's covered in the book. And people need to be aware of the bureaucracy and what could go on, and how lucky those people were to even have a roof over their head. And then they lost everything.
Right.
Everything.
Right. And then what happens? And then as a society, we have a problem, and we have a problem with homelessness. And so much of the homeless, that's exactly what we're looking at.
Nobody wants them in their backyard, though. Nobody wants to pay higher taxes. You know,
Right.
just get them out of my sight.
Right, exactly. So now in doing what you've done, and again, you know, no holds bar. You talk about shock treatments. You talk about everything in the book. What do you hope happens? What are you trying to do now to get more people aware, besides the book, which of course is a wonderful way to do it?
Well, I want it to go viral. I want it to be a big seller, international. That's my big dream, because then with the foundation I've set up in my sister's name, money can be funneled into the foundation. And I'm not doing not-for-profit. It's to be a subsidiary of my S corporation. And then all that extra money coming in from wine tasting events and buying raffle tickets and sales of the book can be used to give back to community health centers and what have you, and for clothing and for counseling, and just, you know, raising the awareness that way, and just knowing that we're giving back. And there's a foundation that's just like the, you know, Susan B. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation. What about somebody with what about bipolar? Oh, it's okay. You breast cancer and those illnesses, but not mental illness. Okay, how can we treat mental illness differently? Because
Right.
these people, I can guarantee you a large percentage of these people used to be somebody or had a career in an education, and then it all fell apart. And then they're discarded, and then they can't even.
Right. Yeah. Where do you go? I mean, how do you find out? You look at the state, you look at the statistics, and you even talk about the statistics of healthcare and what the people experiencing mental illness, and where do they go, and what if they are alone? What if they don't have somebody that can help them, and how awful that is. And you look what you had to do to go through to keep your, you know, like we go back to the running, you get into running because you have to be careful of your own head, because you have to be there.
Yeah, and that's, you know, you have to be there. You don't have to, but you should be there. I mean, you're doing the right thing.
Exactly.
Taking care of a person.
Exactly. Yeah. And when people hear your story, like they're hearing it on the radio now all over the place, and when they can get your book, Be There, My Lived Experience with My Sister's Bipolar Disorder. You can get that on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Well, you know, you have a website too that people can go and learn more.
And the audiobook's coming out soon too.
Yeah.
Where the actual, for people that don't get the hard copy, they can actually hear the letters read.
Yeah.
Not all the letters, because the print was too small, but they'll hear me reading the letters my sister wrote me.
Yeah. What do you hope happens as a result that people, you know, if people, like I said, read the book, hear the audio, that maybe they're motivated to pay more attention to those around them and do something?
Yeah, and if the sales are big, and contribute, help put money in to help build a community, a center for people to go to, or a place for them to live, like the big stars have done, Bruce Springsteen and some other people. And I know Glenn Close has a foundation. I read that her sister's bipolar, and they're movie stars, so of course they're gonna. But I'm not a movie star, but I want I think my story is compelling, and it's, I would say the majority of people are regular people. They're not famous people, but everybody I know, I have a lot of friends, everybody I know has somebody in their family or somebody they know that has a mental health issue. It's just rampant.
It's rampant. That's why I thought it was important to do this interview and share this with everyone, on this show, because I think that there is somebody in our lives, no matter whether it's a relative or a friend or whatever, that they're dealing with some kind of a mental disorder. And the more we talk about it, the more we can take steps to helping people, solving the crisis. You're a great example of Bruce Springsteen, who himself struggles mightily with depression and has talked openly about that. And Glenn Close, who her sister, as you said, she's always been super active because she had a role like your role where she tried to do everything she could. And, it's never enough, because I think we're at a tipping point, a crisis point.
And you would think that all the famous people that there's a section in there of the book, or the postcard I have, of some famous people that have mental illnesses. You have Anthony Bourdain committed suicide, Kate Spade committed suicide. Based on what I read, they were suffering depression. We don't know. Maybe they were more depressed than they were manic. But the worst case scenario is committing suicide. Like Betsy tried to several times. But she was smart enough to know that she was reaching that point. She would check herself into the hospital.
Oh, right. So that luckily for all of you, that you didn't have to deal with that, because she had took the step. She knew she wasn't right.
Yeah, the Quaaludes were probably her attempt to kill herself, because she didn't know what was going on with herself back then. Right. When you take an overdose, you're probably doing it because you want to end all this racing mind.
Right. Well, I think it's such an important story. Linsey Willis, keep raising the awareness out there for sure. And thank you for joining us.
And thank you for having me, Kate. I appreciate it.
So once again, the name of the book is Be There, My Lived Experience with My Sister's Bipolar Disorder. Great insights into Betsy's life and pages dedicated to her writings, which really give you some insight. And you can gain insight, I think, into, the sufferings that someone with this condition goes through. And as I mentioned before, I'm sure there are people that are dealing with something similar, and there are absolutely resources out there. I'm Kate Delaney. We'll see you next time for another edition of the show.